Years later, she rejected the $1 million offer.
Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, she was like third or fourth in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable, right?
Not all revenge roars. It whispers occasionally. An empire can fall apart with just one choice and one word. For Caitlin Clark, getting even didn't mean taking jabs on social media or retaliating in interviews. Her retaliation was really easy. No, she replied. Geno Auriemma, no. No to the heritage of UConn. Years later, she received a $1 million offer, but she turned it down. It seemed ridiculous on paper. Who turns down more than $1 million for 8 weeks of basketball? However, this was more than a contract. It served as a lifeline for a man who had previously disregarded, denigrated, and ignored her. She did more than simply pass on a salary when Clark turned it down. The man who never believed he could be humiliated was humbled by her.
That's the worst part about new fans. They have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
Points, assists, and trophies are not the only factors. It has to do with power. Geno Auriemma served as women's basketball's gatekeeper for many years. The coach who made the decisions on who was important, who received attention, and who was forgotten. However, Caitlin Clark changed that. She didn't require his program, his checkbook, or his approval. Without him, she established her kingdom. And when he eventually stretched out, she said, "I don't need you," with a quiet firmness. "I'm necessary for you." Every tale of retaliation begins with an error. Go wasn't a poor timeout or a failed play. It was conceit, blindingly arrogant. Prior to Clark becoming the sports spokesperson, she was a young girl with a dream before the sold-out arenas and record-breaking TV ratings. She freely acknowledged it. The UConn was the world's coolest place.
What does bother me is some of the people I deeply respect, their basketball credentials, their basketball history, their commitment to basketball and women's basketball, I think have really not covered themselves in glory with some of this commentary.
The summit of women's basketball, the dynasty, the empire, and Tennessee Moore Stewart's residence. Nothing was greater for a girl growing up in Iowa. And the route was clear when it came time for hiring. The best recruiter in the history of the game and the most captivating talent of her time. However, there was never a call. Geno seldom ever used her coach to send a message, never answered the phone, never called Clark, and never called her parents. That stillness was deafening to the best recruiter of all time. Furthermore, it wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. It was an obvious message. They didn't prioritize her. His justification was that UConn didn't want 2-point guards and had already secured Paige Bickers. On the surface, all right. However, the abuse followed. Geno advised Clark to give UConn a call if she truly wanted him. Consider that. Years before anybody else thought Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort, the coach who established his reputation for finding once-in-a-generation potential accused a teenager of not pursuing him. It was more than a recruiting blunder. It was disrespectful.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart.
The sort you never forget. Clark silently stored it away in exchange. She would go somewhere that had faith in her if Geno didn't. She decided on Iowa, a program devoid of UConn's banners, dynasty glow, or mystique. It appeared to be a consolation reward to many. However, Clark saw it as liberation. She wasn't Paige's shadow at Iowa. Geno didn't think about her. The recruit was her, the person in charge of the program. And she reworked the script as soon as she set foot in Iowa City. Threes of her logo were more than just shots. They were declarations. Her sold-out venues were more than just audiences. They served as evidence. Her TV rating-shattering records weren't accidental. They served as receipts. Every basket, viral highlight, and broken record served as a reminder that you were not present. Geno, meanwhile, intensified his efforts. He relied on conceit rather than humility. With patronizing sound bites, he dismissed her, referring to her as a child having fun in the driveway. He attempted to reduce her genius to something commonplace rather than recognizing her as a generational force. However, Madison Square Garden is not sold out by ordinary. Ordinary doesn't make the WNBA relevant to the general public. Ordinary doesn't.
She's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of that league. And she's a rookie.
And that's where the irony is most acute. When Caitlin Clark knocked, Geno shut the door. He assumed she would become simply another talented player. Rather, without him, she created the largest empire in women's basketball history. And Clark didn't get upset when he eventually turned around with the contract in hand. She refrained from gloating. She just said no. And the penalty of that one word was greater than the loss of a title. Geno Auriemma was unable to resist. He always managed to bring Caitlin Clark back into Paige Beaker's comparisons whenever her name was mentioned. Paige was just as fearless as Clark. Paige had connected with fans just as much as Clark had. It wasn't at random. It was a tactic. Geno maintained his prominence by linking Clark's ascent to his preferred players. He wanted everyone to think that her achievement had nothing to do with the dynasty he established. However, backhanded praise wears thin and people, fans, analysts, and other coaches noticed.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP of the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
They were able to spot the deception. Qualifiers weren't necessary for Clark's genius. She was shattering records for the sport and attracting larger audiences than the majority of professional teams, and altering the discourse about women's basketball. However, Geno was gently clutching to his throne while grinning for the cameras. The insecurity that arises when the spotlight is shifting away and there is nothing you can do to stop it was hidden under the charm. Eventually, the mask came off. The subtle jabs were no longer sufficient. Geno moved from disparaging Clark to directly attacking her supporters. His tactic has been veiled as comments for months. Then, in June 2024, he made a mistake that he would never be able to undo during an interview on The Dan Patrick Show. Caitlin Clark wasn't the only person questioned by the Hall of Fame coach, who was meant to symbolize the highest level of women's basketball. He pursued her admirers. He referred to her fans as insane. They didn't comprehend the game, he claimed. Then, incredibly, he said they had no idea what they were doing. The sport of women's basketball was being harmed by them.
There's a lot of investors in this league. One investor, been trying to keep quiet about, his investment in the league ever since his comments that he made about a young rookie. Pretty much, had him in the headlines for about a month and a half. That is Geno Auriemma, dog. I'm here to tell you, he's part owner of this league.
What offense had they committed? Thinking that as a rookie, Clark may place in the top 4 in the MVP voting. That didn't seem like passion to Geno. It was foolishness. Diana put it the best. This kid is in for a rude awakening, he said. Take a moment to consider that. Because of Clark, women's basketball has just attracted millions of new fans. Families wearing jerseys were arriving. Children were setting up camp to greet her. WNBA broadcasts were being watched by casual fans. For the first time in his life, Geno responded with insult rather than appreciation or celebration. He made fun of a surge of fresh energy rather than embracing it. This was not an analysis. This was not an analysis of strengths and flaws by a coach. This was a private matter. It was a straight strike at Clark's vitality. The same individuals who had brought women's basketball into the public eye. Geno was more than just Clark. He was discounting the supporters who enabled her ascent. And everybody paid attention because he's Geno Auriemma. His statements were hurtful and revealing because they held weight. He wasn't merely undervaluing her admirers when he said they had no idea. He was misjudging her. He claimed that the success wasn't sustainable and that the hoopla wasn't genuine.
They've tried to do everything they could to make the most of the situation. They tried to do make the most of Caitlin Clark not playing by hinting everything and basically making people think that Caitlin Clark was going to play.
That he would ultimately be shown to be correct. This is where the story takes a wonderful turn, though. Geno was mistaken. He wasn't even near. On Twitter, Clark did not respond. Interviews were not trimmed by her. She didn't have to. The only location that mattered was where she responded. The court's ruling and subsequent events went beyond simple vindication. Geno's credibility was destroyed. Rookie of the Year went to Caitlin Clark. She didn't end there. She was a member of every WNBA first team. And when the MVP votes were tallied, she came in at number 4, precisely where her purportedly naive supporters had expected. Geno chuckled at the very forecast, but it came to pass. His authority collapsed as a result. It was more than just a victory for Clark. For her admirers, who had made fun of and humiliated every parent who took their child to visit her, it was a victory. Every casual viewer that tuned in.
You see it on the NBA side, and you're going to see it on this side, where, you look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to come with some grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time.
Each new fan who fell for the rhetoric. Geno brushed them off as an issue. They were prophetic, as Clark demonstrated. The best part is that she accomplished it silently. Silent retaliation. No outburst, no conflict, no drama, just outcomes. She gave performances that were unacceptable every night, including logo threes, crossovers that stopped opponents, and assists that lit up highlight reels. There was no disagreement by the time the awards were announced. Without ever mentioning his name, she had silenced him. Is that poetry, in your opinion? Geno had established himself as the authority on women's basketball, the wise elder who is more knowledgeable than everyone else, even the fans and the media. However, the supporters were correct. Clark was correct. Geno was mistaken. She sold out every arena. She broke every record. Each praise she received served as a further reminder that he was no longer the kingmaker. He wasn't necessary for her. She didn't. Here's the irony. Clark had no intention of disproving Geno. She wasn't trying to win his approval. She wasn't even considering him. All she was doing was being Caitlin Clark, and that was sufficient to reveal him.